The pediatric wing always smelled faintly of bubblegum antiseptic and something sweet, apple juice maybe, or the strawberry shampoo from the little one's bath carts. But beneath that scent was something heavier, quieter, the weight of worry, the hush of waiting. Nurse Elise Whitaker had learned to move gently in that space. Not because the children were delicate, many of them were tougher than most adults she knew, but because their families frayed easily. One wrong word, a poorly timed glance, and a mother could come undone. A father could shatter. She liked the early shifts best, the ones where dawn hadn't fully climbed through the hospital windows and the hallways held a certain hush, like the whole floor was holding its breath for one more hour of sleep. Elise walked softly, coffee warm in her hands, her ponytail damp from a quick shower. Room 304 had the lights dimmed. She nudged the door open with her elbow. Sophie Alvarez was curled up in the plastic recliner, her knees pulled to her chest. 8 years old, with long dark hair and a streak of pink near her temple, washable dye, Elise had learned on the second day. The IV in her arm glowed faintly green under the monitor's soft pulse. She was fighting something aggressive, neuroblastoma, the kind of word that never sounded less cruel no matter how many times Elise said it. Next to the bed, a woman sat on a stool, her shoulders rigid. Thin cardigan stretched across her arms, blonde hair tied back in a hasty knot. Elise had seen her before, the child's mother, Hannah. She hardly ever left. Elise smiled quietly and crouched beside her. "You've been here all night again." Hannah startled. "She asked me not to go. I didn't want to wake the nurses." "You wouldn't have. I'm glad you stayed. We're adjusting her meds today, so it's good she has you here." Elise rose and checked the chart, her voice low. "Did she eat anything?" "Half a muffin, some juice. That's better than yesterday." When Elise glanced over, Hannah was blinking rapidly. Elise reached out almost instinctively and touched her arm. "You're doing really well. I know how hard this is. You don't have to say anything, just breathe for now." Hannah closed her eyes, nodded. The silence wrapped around them like gauze. It stayed that way until a soft cough came from the bed. "Mama." Elise stepped back, letting Hannah lean and close. Her hand lingered on the back of the woman's shoulder before she turned to leave. She didn't see the man just outside the door. He stood still, tall and quiet, dressed in a worn gray jacket and jeans, coffee in one hand and his other curled tight in his pocket. He wasn't scheduled for visitation that early, but no one stopped him anymore. The staff knew his face. Rafael Alvarez, Sophie's father. He'd come in through the side entrance, avoiding the bustle of morning rounds. He preferred that hour before the building fully woke, when he could linger unnoticed in the hallway just outside his daughter's room, watch her sleep, watch Hannah hold her hand, watch Elise. He hadn't meant to watch Elise, but he did every morning now. He noticed how she smoothed Sophie's pillow before she left, even when Sophie wasn't awake. How she bent down to meet Hannah's eyes, never towering over her like a nurse with answers, but crouching like someone who cared enough to listen. He noticed her hands, strong, small, always warm. She touched people like they mattered. He hadn't been touched like that in a long time. Raphael shifted against the wall, willing himself not to think about it. About the way her voice lingered in his chest long after he left the hospital. About how he caught himself waiting for it every morning. About how, when she wasn't on shift, the room felt different, dimmer. He took a slow breath and stepped inside. Elise was by the supply cart, restocking gauze and wiping down a tray. She turned at the sound of footsteps, her face lifting in polite recognition. "Morning, Mr. Alvarez." "Raphael, please." She smiled. "Right, Raphael. How's she doing?" "Better today. Her fever's down, she ate a little, and I think she might be ready to try painting again." His mouth curved, the faintest smile. "She's been asking for her watercolors. I can bring them in after lunch, if she's feeling strong enough." There was a pause. Elise felt it, that strange quiet that sometimes slipped between them, where something tried to surface but never quite did. She rubbed the back of her neck. "Would you like some more coffee?" she asked. "There's a fresh pot in the nurse's lounge. It's terrible, but it's hot." "I'd like that if it's not too much trouble." "It's never trouble." Elise led him down the hallway, careful not to let her steps hurry. It wasn't unusual to chat with parents, to share weak coffee and quiet concern, but something in her chest beat strangely fast. She told herself it was the early hour, the empty stomach. In the lounge, she poured 2 cups. When she turned, Raphael had taken the window seat. "This your usual shift?" he asked. "I've been switching around lately. Nights, mornings were short-staffed." He nodded. "It means a lot that you're here. Sophie likes you. She talks about you." "She's an incredible kid." "She is," his voice softened. "She gets that from her mom." There was a quietness in that sentence that didn't feel accidental. Elise sat across from him. You're not together anymore. He shook his head. It's been a few years. It wasn't one of those angry splits, just a slow one, sad in the way quiet things are sad. She nodded that she understood. She has someone else now, he added. A boyfriend, he's good to Sophie, that's what matters. And you, she asked, then immediately regretted how quickly it came. He didn't seem bothered. Me, I work, I come here, I try to stay hopeful. Her heart ached a little at the simplicity of it. She sipped her coffee. I see the way you talk to her, Raphael said suddenly. Hannah, you're good with her, not everyone is. I think she carries a lot of it alone, even with you both here. Some of the weight, it never leaves her face. She blames herself, not out loud, but I know she does. Oh, she shouldn't. No, but we all do that. Carry the blame like it's going to protect them somehow. Elise looked at him, really looked. His eyes were tired but kind, brown with a fleck of green near the center. His jaw bore the scruff of someone who didn't always sleep at home. His hands were calloused. She wondered if he worked construction or maybe something mechanical. Something about him made her want to offer a kindness she didn't fully understand yet. I think you're doing better than you believe, she said quietly. Raphael didn't reply, but something in his face softened, and when he looked at her again, it was different. As if he'd seen her before, and now he was really seeing her. And Elise, with her coffee cooling in her hands and her chest aching from something she couldn't name yet, knew that whatever this was, whatever flicker of something had begun to spark between them, it had already taken root somewhere deep. She just hadn't figured out what it would grow into yet. The hospital had a small courtyard tucked behind the south wing, where ivy clung stubbornly to old stone walls and the benches stayed warm in the afternoon sun. It wasn't large, just enough space for a few chairs, some flower beds, and the occasional moment of quiet that didn't feel sterile. Elise sometimes brought patients out there when their oxygen held steady and the weather was kind, but today it was Sophie who asked. Can I go outside? She whispered, her voice a little hoarse. Hannah looked up sharply. Sweetheart, are you sure you're feeling strong enough? I want to feel the sun just for a little. Elise, who just finished logging vitals, turned from the monitor. We could try, she said gently, just 10 minutes and only if your counts are good, but we'll need the mask and the portable IV. Sophie nodded solemnly, the corners of her mouth lifting into the first real smile Elise had seen in days. 10 minutes turned into nearly 30. Elise stayed close as Sophie sat nestled between her parents on a wide bench in the corner, wrapped in a crocheted blanket someone's grandmother had donated last winter. She watched the little girl tilt her head back, letting the sunlight soak into her eyelids like she was memorizing it. Elise stood nearby with her chart, giving them space without going far. She didn't expect Raphael to come over, but when he did, she didn't move away. She hasn't asked to go outside in weeks, he said quietly. She's starting to feel safe again. Raphael glanced over at Hannah and Sophie, who were giggling softly at something, their foreheads nearly touching. His eyes were full of something Elise couldn't quite name, grief maybe, but also reverence. She's a fighter, he said. She's lucky to have both of you. He hesitated. Can I ask you something? Of course. He looked at her then in that way that made her breath catch. How do you do it? Stay soft with everything you see here. Elise didn't answer right away. She looked out towards Sophie, watched the way her small fingers clutched the blanket. I don't stay soft all the time. Sometimes I go home and cry in my car before I even open my door. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and wonder if anything I do really helps. But then a child smiles again, or a mother breathes for the first time in days, or a dad like you asks how to stay hopeful. Her voice wavered slightly. That's how I keep going. Raphael didn't speak, but his hand brushed hers briefly where it rested on the arm of the chair. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, but it was deliberate. She didn't pull away. That night, Elise stayed late, catching up on notes and finishing a discharge summary for another patient. She just shut down her computer when she saw Hannah walking down the hall alone, arms crossed over her chest. Elise, she asked, hesitating by the nurse's station. Elise turned, concerned. Is Sophie okay? She's fine, sleeping, it's just, Hannah bit her lip. Could you sit with her for a bit? I forgot my phone charger in the car and I don't want to leave her alone. Of course. She followed Hannah back to 304, where Sophie slept under a wash of yellow lamplight. Her small chest rose and fell with the soft cadence of sleep, a teddy bear nestled close. Elise sank into the chair beside the bed. For a moment she just watched her. This child who had somehow started to feel like her own heart was walking around outside her body. Then Sophie stirred. "Elise," she murmured. "I'm here. Can you stay? As long as you need." Her hand was small and clammy when it found Elise, but her grip was certain. Elise stayed still, letting the weight of that trust settle over her like something sacred. By the time Hannah returned, Sophie was asleep again. Hannah stood in the doorway looking at them, her expression unreadable. "You're good with her," she said finally. "I care about her." Hannah nodded. "That's clear. She talks about you more than anyone, including us." Elise smiled faintly. "She's special." "She is." There was another pause. Hannah stepped forward, her voice low. "Raphael, been quieter lately, but lighter somehow. I think that's you." "I'm just trying to help." "I know, but sometimes helping changes people. I think you've done that." Elise didn't know what to say. She felt the heat rise in her chest. She hadn't meant to be a balm for anyone's pain, only a steady hand, a presence. But maybe those things mattered more than she thought. When she left that night, the air outside was thick with late spring warmth. She pulled her jacket tight around her and started toward the parking lot. She didn't expect to see Raphael waiting near the entrance, hands shoved in his pockets, a paper bag dangling from one wrist. "I figured you hadn't eaten," he said. She blinked at him. "How did you?" "You've been here 12 hours, it shows in your eyes." She laughed softly. "Thanks for that." He offered the bag, sandwich from the deli, nothing fancy. "I didn't know you waited." "I wasn't sure if I would, but then I remembered how you looked at her today, Sophie, and how she looked back at you, and I just didn't want you to think it goes unnoticed." The bag was warm. She held it close. "I'll eat it," she said, voice quieter now, "but only if you sit with me." They found a bench near the ambulance bay. The sky above them was turning the color of spilled ink. Raphael unwrapped a sandwich for himself, and for a few minutes they sat in silence. Then he spoke. "When Hannah told me she was pregnant, I was terrified. Not because I didn't love her, I did, but because I didn't know how to be what Sophie would need. I still don't. You're here every day, that matters." "I used to think love was about getting it right all the time, but lately I think it's just about showing up, over and over." She looked at him. "That's a beautiful way to put it." He turned to her then, his eyes steady. "I think that's what you do too. You show up, even when it's hard, even when it breaks your heart." Elise felt something shift in her chest, a quiet warmth, slow and certain. Raphael didn't reach for her hand this time. But he didn't have to. It was already happening, something unfolding quietly between them, something careful, unspoken. And Elise, for all her cautious hope, didn't look away. A week passed. Sophie's energy returned in flickers, an hour of coloring, then sleep, a short walk, then silence. Her hair had begun to thin in places, wispy strands clinging to her pillow. Elise noticed it first during a routine temperature check, the way Sophie tugged her hoodie a little lower over her ears. "Does it bother you?" Elise asked gently. Sophie nodded, not quite meeting her eyes. "Want me to help?" Sophie hesitated. "Will it fall out all the way?" "Maybe, but it'll come back. Even the pink part." Elise smiled softly, especially the pink part. They picked a sunny afternoon when the light poured in like a blessing, and Elise brought in a scarf box she kept for this exact reason. Wrapped in tissue paper were soft cotton wraps, some floral, some plain, all donated with care. Sophie chose one with tiny moons and stars. "You can be the first one to wear this," Elise said as she knelt beside her. "Will I look weird?" "You'll look like someone very brave." Sophie held perfectly still as Elise tied the wrap gently, tucking the ends beneath the nape of her neck. Then she reached for the mirror and stared at her reflection for a long time. "I don't look sick," she whispered. Elise rested a hand on her shoulder. "You look like a fighter." The door creaked open behind them. Raphael stepped in, a book tucked under his arm. He stopped when he saw Sophie. "Wow," he said softly, "that looks beautiful." Sophie beamed, pride washing over her. Raphael crossed to her, setting the book down. "You know what it reminds me of? When you used to wear your astronaut helmet and pretend the couch was a spaceship." Sophie laughed. "And you'd be the alien, remember?" "Still am," he said, "just a really tired one." Elise watched the exchange quietly, her hand still resting on Sophie's back. She hadn't expected Raphael to look at her the way he did next, like the gratitude in his chest had nowhere to go but her. That night, Elise didn't go straight home. Her shift ended just before sundown, but her feet carried her instead to a small diner across the street, the kind with checkered floors and booths patched with duct tape. She slid into the corner seat and ordered tea. She'd just begun stirring in honey when the door jingled. Raphael. He spotted her instantly and paused, one hand on the doorframe like he wasn't sure he had the right to follow where his heart had led. She lifted a hand in quiet welcome. He joined her. You always come here, he asked. Sometimes it's quiet, they don't rush you out. They sat in a silence that didn't press too hard, the kind that grows between people who have begun to feel safe in each other's company. You didn't have to do all that today, he said after a while. The scarf, the mirror, you could have just checked her vitals and moved on. Elise shrugged, though her voice softened. I wanted her to feel like herself again. Sometimes medicine isn't the only thing they need. He looked down at his hands. Hannah was crying in the hallway after she saw Sophie. She didn't think I noticed. I did too after I left the room. His gaze met hers. That's what I don't understand about you. What? How you keep opening your heart when you know it might break again. She stirred her tea, then set the spoon down carefully. Maybe the trick isn't keeping it from breaking. Maybe it's just letting it break and trusting that it will heal differently each time. He said nothing for a while, just watched her, like every word she spoke gave shape to something he'd been trying to name inside himself for years. Do you ever let people take care of you? He asked, quieter now. The question startled her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Finally she answered, I try, sometimes, but I think I've spent a long time being the strong one. It's hard to step out of that. I could try, he said, and his voice wasn't teasing, taking care of you. She felt the words settle somewhere deep. He didn't reach for her hand, but she felt it anyway, this invisible tether growing tighter, closer. Over the next few days, something shifted, subtly. Raphael began staying longer during his visits, sometimes waiting until Elise's shift ended so they could walk out together. He brought her little things, a chocolate bar, a hair clip shaped like a daisy, a keychain Sophie had made from beads. One evening, Elise found a note tucked beneath her clipboard. You were right, she looks like a fighter, and so do you. It was unsigned, but she knew the handwriting. And even though she tried not to let it, her heart answered. Friday brought bad news. Sophie spiked a fever in the middle of the night. Her counts dropped sharply, and by morning she was on oxygen again. Elise wasn't on shift until noon, but she came early anyway. When she entered the room, the lights were low. Sophie was curled up tight, the monitor beeping steadily. Hannah sat on one side, a hand resting lightly on her daughter's arm. Raphael was on the other, his expression drawn. She asked for you, Hannah said quietly. Elise moved closer. Hey, warrior girl. Sophie turned her head weakly. Elise. I'm here. Stay. Always. Raphael met her gaze. In that moment there was no room for anything but Sophie. No tension, no hesitation, just the aching tenderness of two people loving a child the best way they knew how. Elise took her usual seat. She told Sophie a story about a girl who lived on a mountain and befriended a fox that only came out when the moon was full. Raphael joined in, adding little details to make Sophie smile. For an hour, they created a world where she was strong and safe and running again. When Sophie finally drifted off, her breathing eased, Elise rose quietly. Raphael followed her into the hallway. Thank you, he said. You don't have to keep thanking me. Yes, I do. There was a beat of silence between them. The hospital hummed softly in the background. Then he asked, can I take you somewhere, just somewhere quiet, no medical forms, no fluorescent lights, just you and me. She hesitated. I know it's complicated, he added quickly, but I haven't felt this safe in a long time, and I think you haven't either. She nodded slowly. Okay, she said, somewhere quiet. His smile was the kind that didn't stretch wide but went deep, like relief wrapped in hope. And even though there was so much unknown, so much left unsaid, Elise felt her chest loosen just a little. It wasn't the end of the story. But it was the beginning of something real. They didn't go far. Just a quiet park on the edge of town, where the river curved gently through rows of willow trees and the air smelled faintly of damp grass and honeysuckle. Raphael brought a thermos of coffee and a blanket folded into the backseat of his truck. Elise met him there after her evening shift, hair still damp from a quick shower, wearing the kind of sweater that held the day's weariness like a second skin. She didn't speak right away, neither did he. They just sat side by side on the blanket, knees brushing. The river moved slowly below them. Elise finally broke the silence. I almost didn't come. He turned to her quiet, why not? Because I didn't want to make it harder for either of us. You have so much to hold, and I'm not sure I know how to be something new for someone else. Raphael's gaze didn't waver. You don't have to be new, just real. She looked away, her eyes fixed on the water. Most of the people I get close to are in and out of hospital rooms. Some stay, some don't. It teaches you not to attach too tightly. I get that, he said. I've done a lot of letting go too. She glanced at him, surprised. He wasn't someone who spoke easily about pain, but when he did, it never felt rehearsed, just honest. He shifted slightly, pulling one knee up. After Hannah and I separated, I kept thinking I'd meet someone else, that the loneliness would settle itself, but it never really did. I got good at pretending it was fine. Elise listened without interrupting. But then Sophie got sick, he went on, and everything else stopped mattering. I stopped looking, stopped hoping, until you. She didn't answer right away. The words landed carefully, like stones dropped in still water, each one rippling closer to where she'd hidden her own longing. She turned toward him, the wind catching a piece of hair across her cheek. I don't know where this goes, Raphael, but I think I want to find out. He smiled then, soft and slow, and reached for her hand. And this time she didn't hesitate. At the hospital, the week turned rough. Sophie's numbers stabilized, but her spirits sank. She didn't want to eat, didn't want to paint. Some days she barely spoke. She's tired, Elise explained during rounds. Her body's still fighting, but her heart's worn out. Hannah sat beside the bed, eyes ringed with fatigue. How do I help her? Be there, let her feel whatever she needs to, and remind her that she's not doing this alone. After work, Elise found herself checking her phone more than usual. Raphael had started texting, little check-ins, updates on Sophie. A photo of the moon reflected in a puddle with the caption, "Reminded me of your scarf." They weren't romantic, not exactly, but they were intimate in their own way. He noticed things she didn't expect anyone to notice. One night after her shift had ended and the sun had long gone, she sat on her apartment floor, legs crossed in the middle of a pile of laundry. Her phone buzzed, a new message. Raphael. She asked for you tonight, not me, not Hannah, you. Elise swallowed hard. Elise, I'll come in early. Raphael. I think you've become her lighthouse. She feels safe when you're near. She stared at the screen for a long time, fingers curled around the phone like it might steady her. She hadn't meant to become that, but maybe that's how love always began, quietly, without permission. Sophie had a better morning. Elise came early, as promised, bringing a small clay fox she'd found in a thrift shop. It was lopsided and hand-painted, with a chipped ear and eyes too wide, but Sophie lit up when she saw it. It looks like the one from your story, she whispered. That's why I got it. Sophie kept it close, tucked in the blankets. You make things feel less scary. Elise touched her hand lightly. You do the same for me. Later, when Raphael arrived, Sophie was still awake. Guess what, she said, her voice a little stronger. Elise brought me a fox. He glanced at Elise, then back at Sophie. She has a way of showing up with exactly what you need. Sophie nodded seriously. She should stay forever. Elise laughed, her eyes catching Raphael. I'll do my best, she said. That weekend, Raphael invited her over for dinner. He lived in a modest two-bedroom house on the edge of a wooded stretch. The driveway was cracked and the porch light flickered when she arrived, but the living room smelled of cumin and fresh tortillas, and music played softly from a speaker near the window. Chicken enchiladas, he said, wiping his hands on a dish towel. They're my mom's recipe, hope that's okay. It smells incredible, Elise said, genuinely surprised by how easily she fit into the space. Dinner was slow, unrushed. They talked about everything but the hospital, books, music, the strange comfort of rainy Sundays. She told him about the time she broke her wrist falling off her grandmother's porch trying to rescue a stray kitten. He told her about the canoe he built by hand the year after the divorce and how it still leaks a little near the stern. Afterward, they sat on the couch with mugs of tea, legs touching. Raphael turned toward her. This is strange. What is? This feeling of something beginning and not being afraid of it. She looked at him, heart tightening. Me too. He leaned in slowly, giving her space to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle, thoughtful, a question asked with lips and answered with breath. When they parted, her hand stayed resting lightly on his chest. Can I tell you something? He whispered. Of course. You scare me, not in a bad way, just in the way things matter do. She nodded, forehead resting lightly against his. I know the failings. Later, when she drove home under a sky full of stars, Elise felt something she hadn't in a long time. Not giddiness, not certainty, but peace. Something was being built between them, not rushed, not forced, just made from quiet understanding and shared grief and small, extraordinary kindnesses. And somewhere deep in her chest, she knew. This wasn't just healing. This was becoming. Summer arrived slowly the way healing sometimes does, not in a rush of color but in the gentle unfurling of light. By late June, the pediatric wing was bathed in long, golden afternoons, and Sophie's numbers had begun to hold. She still tired easily, still had to take anti-nausea meds every morning and was due for another round of scans. But she smiled again often, she laughed more, she asked questions that weren't about her illness. On a Thursday, she asked if she could bring Elise to her school when she got better. I want her to meet everyone, Sophie said, swinging her feet over the edge of the bed. They need to know who helped save me. Elise knelt to tie Sophie's slipper. You're the one who did the hard part, sweetheart. Sophie looked at her, suddenly serious, but I didn't do it alone. The next scan came. Raphael and Hannah sat together while they waited, hands clasped loosely on the bench outside the room, the way only two people who have shared 100 versions of fear can sit together. Elise stayed nearby, trying to look busy at the nurse's station, pretending not to glance down the hallway every few minutes. The results took longer than usual, a cruel kind of waiting. When the oncologist finally emerged, his face was drawn, unreadable. Raphael stood immediately. It's not gone, the doctor said, but it's smaller, significantly. We're responding to treatment. Relief didn't come in one great wave. It arrived in pieces, Hannah's shoulders dropping, Raphael sitting down hard against the wall, Sophie asking if she could have pancakes now. Later, when the hallway had cleared and Raphael stepped into the break room where Elise sat sipping coffee alone, the look on his face said everything before his words did. She's going to be okay, he whispered, voice cracking. Elise rose without thinking. He pulled her into him, burying his face in the curve of her neck, and they stood there in the quiet hum of vending machines and worn linoleum, clinging to one another. He didn't let go, not then, not even when her hands found his and squeezed back. They celebrated in small ways. Sophie got pancakes from the cafeteria, stacked high with whipped cream and sprinkles. Hannah brought in a bright pink journal for her to write her dreams in. Raphael found a thrifted karaoke machine and promised her the living room stage as soon as she came home. Elise brought in a string of paper stars and hung them across the ceiling. You said you liked the sky, she said when Sophie blinked up at them in wonder. Now you've got your own. Sophie whispered, I love you, so softly that Elise wasn't sure she'd heard it right. But Raphael did. He looked at Elise like something deep in his heart had settled. Later, as Elise sat beside Sophie while she colored, Raphael crouched quietly beside her chair. She means it, he said, and so do I. Elise turned to look at him, her throat thick. I've tried not to fall too fast. I didn't give you much choice, he said, smiling. You didn't have to, she said, and this time it didn't feel frightening to say it. 2 weeks later, Sophie was discharged. She would be back, treatments weren't over, and they all knew there were more hard days ahead, but she was going home. Elise stood with the discharge papers clutched to her chest as Raphael packed up the room. Sophie was bouncing between her parents, giddy and impatient, begging to stop for slushies on the way. Hannah wrapped Elise in a hug at the doorway. Thank you, she said, for more than I'll ever be able to explain. Elise squeezed back, she made it easy. No, she didn't, Hannah said, but you did. Raphael lingered until the last moment. He held Elise's gaze while Sophie sang softly to herself in the hallway, twirling in her scarf like it was made of light. She wants you to come by next week, he said. She's planning a tea party. Does that mean I'm invited? It means you're expected. He stepped closer. Elise. She reached up, touching the side of his face. You don't have to say it. I want to, he said. I love you. And then she was in his arms again, the scent of him familiar now. Faint cologne, laundry soap, something warm and steady. I love you too, she whispered. And for the first time in months, maybe years, she didn't feel the urge to keep moving, to hold herself apart. She let herself stay. They built a life slowly, quietly. Elise kept her shifts at the hospital, but sometimes she left a little earlier, came in a little later. Raphael made room in his house for small things, an extra toothbrush, her book left dog-eared on the kitchen counter. Sophie kept a photo of Elise in her journal, taped carefully to the back page where she wrote, "My nurse, my friend, my hero." The love between Raphael and Elise didn't shout. It grew from long walks after dinner, hands brushing, from notes left in coat pockets, from sitting beside each other on hard chairs through the bad days, from trust earned day by quiet day. They never rushed. They never had to. Because sometimes the truest love grows not from sparks or declarations, but from comfort offered at the right moment, from the way someone sees you fully and stays anyway. And in the gentle rhythm of that love, Elise found what she didn't know she'd been waiting for. A second chance. A place to rest her heart. A family made not of blood, but of tenderness and time. And that, after everything, was enough.